Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me is my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome back, sir.
So, Noah, do you ever look at your stuff at home and go, I probably should be doing this better?
All the time. And then it immediately is typically followed up, but not tonight. I'll do that later. And then, later.
Yeah, but you got to do it at some point, right?
Yes. How do you, so before I can see where this conversation is going, you had a bit of a revelation, didn't you, Steve?
Well, I don't know about a revelation, but I've always done something of, I've always made an attempt to be somewhat professional at home in terms of backup strategy and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I've been trying to wrangle my sprawling infrastructure where I can watch it better. I think that's ultimately where I've been focusing on the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm. I think that you think that I think it's funny that you have a data center in your basement.
All of the above.
Yes.
Well, part of that is when things fail, like we've come to rely on a bunch of this stuff, and I would prefer to catch these things before someone tells me, or before we leave, or
absolutely
all of these sorts of things. So I've been really trying to tighten up. Like, it's okay. It is okay. I would be okay with running a small business like this, but I can do better.
Yes.
And I have been trying to tighten this up. And so I was just thinking, I wonder what Noah's looks like.
Yeah, you'd be embarrassed. You'd be embarrassed of me is really what it amounts to. I will tell you this: the stuff that really matters, the stuff that I really care about. There was a time in my life, and it was really more a function of I was a broke college student and I couldn't afford to do it a different way. So it was what it was. But there was a time in my life where my backup strategy was once every few years I would start to run out of hard drive space. So I would go and upgrade what was my single hard drive to a bigger single hard drive. And I would take the old single hard drive and I would put it in one of those little plastic drive things from Weebitech or Weebitech or something, I don't know, some brand. And I would stick it on a shelf. And then the other drive would go for a year or two. And then I start to fill that one up as I go back. And so the backup strategy was, well, if this here drive ever breaks, I got them there drives over there, which has got most of the stuff on this here drive, at least from the standpoint from where those drives filled up and this guy took over, right? And knock on wood, I never had a problem, and it worked out just fine. These days, it's a little bit more intentional, and so the stuff that I really, really care about, the data, those sorts of things, that is, I think I've got super dialed in. I've talked about many times, the little HP server does CFS replication, and actually, no, that one's doing rsync because I like having different methods. But so that stuff is dialed in completely. But what I am guilty of, and I feel like what you're getting bit by, is I start down a path, I get a thing, I realize it's more useful than I thought it was going to be, or I relied on it a little bit more than I was going to, and before I know it, here's the deal, Steve. Everybody's got a development environment. Smart people separate their development environment from their production environment, and I don't always do that.
Well, sometimes it starts off as something you're tinkering around with, and then if you're not careful, it ends up rolling into production. Not that anybody ever does that professionally, but at home, maybe that happens from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happens, we were kind of talking about this where it's not exactly sprawl where it gets away from you, but you use the term snowball, and that's sort of apt. So we were talking about, I introduced Grafana on top of Home Assistant in order to do better graphing, because back in the day, I've been using Home Assistant for a very long time at this point. And back in the day, the graphing wasn't good. It wasn't their focus. And so I used Grafana to augment that because that's what it's good at. And then I needed to have a very specific use case where I had an alert for what was called a look back, so that it was able to figure out whether anything had changed in the last hour or 2 hours, whatever it was. And Grafana could do that for me. So I plugged it into Telegram, and then I started getting alerts for this one thing that I needed. And because that was there, then I also thought, well, I really should be watching my SSL certs. And so that alert went on there. And so now Grafana inside of Home Assistant is doing a bunch of that heavy lifting. And it really shouldn't be on top of Home Assistant. I'm not hardware poor. And so it should be not on the thing that also runs the house. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't use the thing that runs the house to also monitor the thing that runs the house. It's just generally a bad idea.
Actually, in all seriousness, the is that mentality is why I'm a huge stickler, much to the chagrin of some of the people I work with sometimes, or the people I work for, I guess I should say. I'm a huge stickler on backup should always be pulled, never pushed. So if I'm the thing that's providing redundancy, I will go grab for myself the thing that I am responsible for moving. And then if I've got 3 of those in a row, each guy down the line is pulling from the last guy. It's never a push from the thing because, to your point, if the thing is going to fail, well, I don't want the thing that's supposed to do the work also the thing that I'm relying on to do the work. Then I get too many eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And if the failure is on the pull, where as in the pull tries to reach out and the backup server is not there, mm-hmm. That guy can then say, hey, I couldn't complete this. Whereas if the backup server goes down, it silently dies because you're not getting a notification that it couldn't push.
Exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt your story. Yes, 100%. All that.
No, that's just it. I was just curious about how this saga is going to be ongoing for me. I'm in the process of migrating Grafana outside of Home Assistant, mm-hmm. and to include, I've also had the same sort of thing, as you would say, snowball for Influx, where I used Influx as the backend for Home Assistant, and now there are 11 databases on my Home Assistant Influx. So we're going to fix that. So I was just curious. I'm mostly taking the opportunity to embarrass you in front of the audience.
That's good. That's good. They find it entertaining, or at least I believe so. I have. It's interesting. I have gone the full gamut of things. Right. I have gone from literally a single server running Windows 2000 inside of my air conditioner closet of an apartment condo thing, to a full 42U rack, to a little tiny, I think it's 6U, and it's a little like essentially roto case from SKB that is like, if I was going to go live in the middle of nowhere, this is the little guy I would take with me, and the services that would be within. And I've tried to do 2 things that I've tried to do that I think have helped me here. The first thing is, I've tried to modularize, right? So I've tried to segment up and say, here's the thing that I have to have. So, okay, how do I make it into a module of sorts so that it's easily reproducible and I can run it on a mobile rack, or I can run it off my laptop, or I can run it off of here, or whatever. That's thing one that's helped me. The second part that I think has helped me is I've learned to live with less. So I can do all of the things. I'm capable of doing all the things. Sometimes it's fun to do all of the things, but I've learned to segment, like, these are core essential services and are not going anywhere. And then here's all the fun that's happening. And again, I'd be the first person to put my hand in the air and say, yep, I am guilty of the fun thing has become real leaned on, and if it were to fall over or if it were to go away, I would have some people that are upset. But to your point about paying attention to try to be intentional and professional about this stuff, you didn't know, I didn't know that you were going to bring this up, so you didn't know that I was going to respond this way, but the drain hose for my washing machine pulled out. And as I've mentioned many times, my house was designed in a ridiculously dumb way, in which back in the 60s, they co-located the network operations center with the laundry room, which is a stupid decision for a number of reasons. But what that meant was when the drain hose for the washing machine, everybody can see where this story is going, pulled out, All of the things that were properly mounted in the 42U rack, Steve, were fine. You know, it wasn't fine. The Dell server that had a bad memory stick that I went, I should just pull that one out there. That fixed it. And which it did, because the server booted. The problem was I just left it laying there on the floor, where then a few weeks later, water became, and then it wasn't as fine as it was before. But those sorts of things, right, back to like, well, you feel like you want to have some professional approach to it. There is value in doing that, because what happens is one thing in the chain starts to fall, and then the whole kit and caboodle of cards topples over before you have a chance to really catch it. It's not good.
And then you're in trouble. That's the other thing, right?
You know what's funny? You're not wrong. The first thing that caught the attention that there was a problem was my wall button stopped working. And again, the Orbit panels themselves are awesome. They have never once failed. Noah's ability to maintain a server while sitting on the floor of his laundry room with some water around it, that's a different story, right? And to Dell's credit, just, picking it off the wet, soppy floor and restarting it seemed to do wonders. So thanks for over-engineering that to include, water resistance. That's awesome. I don't think that was advertised, but it worked out well. With that, I'm sufficiently embarrassed. Shall we do some feedback?
Let's do it.
Our first email comes in from Carrie. Carrie writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I wanted to reach out to you regarding two really interesting products that I think you might find interesting. The first, an e-ink device from a company with the similar values to the Dory mentioned in 942. It's an e-ink display with a company that supports open source and open hardware. It's called TRMNL. It's an open, hackable e-ink display that can be used to display anything that you like. You can find more at trmnl.com. The second product is a Micha Comet. It's a small Linux-based handheld computer, and I think it actually lives up to half of what it claims to be. Noah will probably love it. Seems to always be looking for the next small Linux computer that he can take with him everywhere. You can find more at micha.so/comet. You may already be aware of both of these products, but I saw them, made me think of you guys. So I don't know about you, Steve, but I was not aware of either of these projects, so I'm super grateful to this guy for writing in.
I don't follow this stuff. Like the smallest thing that I have is that laptop that we talked about. So
yeah, the HP.
I'm kind of curious to live through you in some regards, but the Steam Deck is as small as I want to go, and even that I wouldn't use it for a computer.
So I will tell you. So let me work backwards. I will tell you that the Micha Comet it's a done deal. So a couple things play into this. The first is timing. My beloved, and I do mean beloved, GPD Pocket computer. I absolutely loved the thing. It was the only laptop I ever had that was socially acceptable to bring around with me when it wasn't socially acceptable to have a laptop. And now I'm back to dragging around an 11-inch Intel laptop, because I don't have my little guy anymore. And it is absolutely devastating. And the only thing that has prevented me from immediately jumping on the eBay and purchasing another one is the way that it was damaged was the way that I carry it in my backpack. And until I have a case or a better way to fix that problem, I'm hesitant to purchase another one, because the same thing is going to happen. Two things appealed to me about the Micha Comet. The first is a price tag at $257. This is a done deal. The second thing that appeals to me, you know what this thing reminds me of, Steve? You're about to, because I'm going to tell you. It's the little handheld, not the Turtlecom, because that was the one the Turtles used, but the one that Shredder used inside of the Ninja Turtles, the little purple one. For whatever reason, that's what it draws my attention to. Just the way that it is, the way that it's structured, the way that the little keypad thing can cycle off of the thing, the way that you can add a keyboard or you can add a thing and then it's got that little like step down deal. I don't know why, but it just makes me think of that little communicator. And then on top of that, when I see the price of $257 and I start looking at it and going, okay, so this thing runs Linux. You can get for $10 more. You can get a hexa-core Cortex ARM A55 1.8 gigahertz. I don't know if I buy into the branding of the for serious horsepower and performance, but you can get it with 8 gigs of RAM. That seems appealing. And then you can get up to 64 or 128 gigs of eMMC. Yeah, buddy, this thing is right up my alley. And so, for me, I look at it, I couldn't care less about the keypads or the gamepad type deal. And so I tend to stay away from those sorts of things. But I start looking at, they have their keyboard extension, and I think this is exactly up my alley. My only question is, what would I run on this thing? So it's an ARM processor, so you're flashing something on it. Do you run like post-market OS? That's where it starts to fall apart. So I'm all over this. I really am. I kind of dig the fact that they have a U.S. presence in Washington, Missouri. But I would be interested to learn what you are to run on this, because when I go to their docs site, it looks like you are installing the tool chain to compile all of the stuff and actually build the kernel yourself and then put packages on there. And that's where my excitement starts to taper down just a little bit, insofar as, so how does one actually use this? Now, Atypical says it uses a variant of Debian. So, I don't know. This thing is super interesting. Again, if I give up the concept of encryption, which is fine, I can do that. That was one of the things I liked about the GPD Pocket, though, is that it functioned just like a normal laptop. But so I give up my expectation of encryption, then I'm back to what? I'm back to, well, it's an ARM computer that runs Linux that doesn't require a generic mobile or like a Google-based mobile operating system. That part's nice. Apps are probably going to be a little limited, but as long as I have a terminal, an email client, messenger, and a web browser, I guess I can get by with that. And the computer that you have in your pocket beats the computer you left back in your hotel room every time, so that appeals to me. So all that to say, I'm real interested in that. The second one that he sends in, the e-ink tablet. I am interested in e-ink. I think there is a tremendous value in these things by way of battery life and by way of being able to read out in the sun and those sorts of things. I'm not exactly sure what I would do with an e-ink display, but I dig the fact that it's open source hardware. I dig the fact that, like Dory, it is hackable, and so you'll be able to use it past when this company wants you to do with it. So I think all of that's great. So stay tuned. I'll let you know. I am eyeing the new JPD micro PC that they released. I'm told it's the size of a phone. That really appeals to me. The fact that it's Intel based really appeals to me. The fact that it would support full distinct encryption really appeals to me. So there's some competition for the Comet. Let's just say that.
How would you use a computer that is the size of a phone? Like, Noah, you're already half blind. Like, well, how are you going to do this?
That's true. Well, I got my Coke goggles now that help me. So I can be restored to not half blind. So that part's good. Where I find pocket computers are just worth their weight in gold is for those moments when you're sitting at a table or you're at some function, particularly one that you don't really want to be at, and there's something else you want to be working on, where everybody else would reach for a banana phone to do their social checkout. I prefer to reach for a laptop. And the amount of things that I'm able to do if I can SSH into a thing, I have found is awesome. And there was a time, and it really made an impact on me. Something really bad was happening at Altispeed, and it was with the client's infrastructure, and I reached a point where everything that could be done had been done, and we were now at a point where we had to wait for this ginormous SQL database to copy from one place to another to see if it was going to be restored. And so we weren't out of the woods until that database was restored, but there was nothing more to do except like acutely watch this file transfer so that the second it was done, database guy gets back in there and does his thing, right? And I was at an impasse point where my choice at that moment was to either go swimming with my kids or stay at this client and babysit this thing. And I'm reasoning through it in my head, and ultimately I got to a point where I start looking around me and I realized everybody at this client has left because they can't work because the server's down anyway. And so I'm literally the only person in the building. And I'm watching a progress bar, and I start to think to myself, I can watch a progress bar from a pool. And so I took a laptop and I went and I took my kids to the pool, and they would tell you that it was just a fun day at the pool. I did not have fun that day, let me tell you. To say I was distracted is to put it lightly. And Steve, you've had I'll call it unpleasant interaction where I'm very distracted by something that's going wrong. It's very obvious that I'm distracted, but my kids were so they were so elated that we were still going to go to the pool that Dad didn't get caught up at work. From their perspective. And it was in that moment that I just had this enormous moment of gratitude where I'm like, thank God I can do my job from anywhere. Thank God that I have the ability that I am doing just as much for this client sitting here at this pool, letting my kids swim and watching this thing as I would be if I were sitting in that hot, sweaty, non-air conditioned IT room while I get home to very disappointed children. And so it was in that moment, it was like a light bulb moment for me. And I had this incredible moment of gratitude. And I have since tried to leverage that largely using these small little computers. Like, okay, well, I need to finish this thing up, but choir concert, or but this, or but that. And so I've learned that there's a balance between both ends. There is absolutely a time to just say, you know what, screw it. This is all getting shut off, and I'll get to it when I get to it because I'm focused on X. There's value in that. I'm probably not as good as I should be at that. But there's also value in I am waiting in this concert hall for this thing to start, and we're all staring at an empty curtain while we wait for the kids to come out. And they had to be there for an hour and a half early for the rehearsals. I have an hour and a half to sit in this highly uncomfortable chair. And what to do? Oh, I know. I'm going to get in. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to get some work done. And in those moments, being able to reach down and just peck away, it's just great, Steve. Just absolutely. Think of the work that you could get done migrating your Grafana instance. If you could do that, well, this is so not your character that this is not going to land at all. But if you could do that while doing and then insert something you don't want to be doing. But as soon as it crosses my mind, I realized you would just not do that. You would just not do that thing.
Well, that and the fact that, like I said, I don't know, that seems too small. Like if I was going to do that, I'd pull out a regular laptop. Like if the idea is Dad has to work, but I can be physically present, and then I would bring up a laptop because what's the point of having that dinky little thing? Like, I don't know. Anyways, you've got a different use case than I do. I don't want to hold us up. It is interesting. And to your point, Steve, there is a reason why it feels socially awkward to bring a laptop. Most people don't do that in restaurants, and that is kind of weird, and maybe I should learn better. So there's that. Our second email comes in from Mike. Mike writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I'm listening to episode 492, and I had a question for you and Steve regarding the Shelly devices. Do you have any concerns with them not being UL listed? For insurance companies in the U.S. not covering damage to homes due to electrical virus because of these devices being used. I love what you guys do, and I listen every week. Best regards, Mike." So let's start with what UL ratings are. Essentially, there's the Underwriter Laboratory, and this is a place where manufacturers of things that are going to be connected to electrical systems send their products to get tested. The testing includes a battery of tests by way of they overvolt them, they run them in hot environments, they run them in moist environments, and they try to get these devices to start on fire. And it has to meet a very specific set of criteria to say, yep, under these circumstances, this device will not start on fire. And if it meets that criteria, it's given a Underwriter Labs or UL certification saying that this has undergone and passed the tests. Now, in the United States, your mileage may vary if you live outside of the United States, but in the United States, no qualified electrician will connect to a live electrical circuit any device that isn't UL listed. So it's not a suggestion, it's not a good idea, it is an absolute requirement. You have to do that if you're connecting something to your house. Now, that said, do we all call qualified electricians to connect stuff to our house? No, we take the screwdriver, we open it up, and just don't touch them two wires together, and it'll be just fine. And then you do what you're going to do, and nobody's the wiser, right? In those circumstances, you got to use a little bit of best judgment. Is everything that's ever been put into my house UL listed? It has not been, right? I had a chandelier that I just really, really liked and knew it wasn't UL listed, didn't care, put it up. After some time, very much like Mike, and having it explained to me by my brother-in-law, who's an electrician, who said, there's a reason they put those labels on there. And let me show you some photos that's happened in people's houses from stuff that wasn't UL listed. And
and bad things. And now we're not talking about anything Shelly related. We're talking about cheap Chinese junk. But bad things can happen because they didn't really test it, and frankly, they don't care. It's about getting something out the door as cheap as possible. In those circumstances, things are not great. That said, I think there's a bit of a misconception that that Shelly devices aren't UL listed. Steve, you did a little bit of digging in your house. What'd you find?
So when I started with doing home automation, I was familiar with UL regulation. So I went out and bought UL devices from Shelly. So they do exist. You just have to you actually have to go searching them out. So if you just went and bought a random Shelly device, chances are it's not going to be UL rated. I even went to my shelf and thought, how many of the things do I have sitting on my shelf are UL rated from Shelly? And the answer is the vast majority of them. I have a couple of just plain power monitoring. They're little tiny ones, and they literally just monitor the voltage coming over the line as they go out. There's no contacts, there's no nothing. It literally is just watching the power going over the line. I have 2 of those sitting on my shelf that are not UL listed. The other 6 are UL listed. You just have to know what you're looking for and make sure you flip them over. If you go to buy them on Amazon or wherever, I have absolutely returned some because they said they were UL listed, and you flip them over and there is no markings to indicate they are. That's important because the UL listed ones are about 20% more expensive, which is why most people don't, especially people who aren't in the know. They don't know, they don't care, and this one's cheaper. Why would I get this other one? So you have to be willing to spend a little bit more. They still exist, and I did an audit. So thank you to the writer. I did an audit on this just to make myself feel better, and I did validate that according to the Shelly integration and home assistant, the stuff that is in my house is all UL rated.
The only disclaimer I would add to this, and now this is a bit of a redneck approach. We've given you the professional answer, so there you go. End of segment. If you want the professional, good on the book answer. My redneck off the book answer is, just because it doesn't have the sticker doesn't necessarily mean it's going to erupt into flames when you provide current to it, right? Shelly's a very reputable company. They make very good things. They engineer things well. They're not trying to cut corners, those sorts of things. And so to a degree, if you're not doing things with it that you're not supposed to be doing with it, that is putting it in damp locations, running more current through it than it's rated, those sorts of things, I don't know that you'd necessarily have a problem not having something UL rated. But to Mike's point, in the unlikely event there's ever a fire, you better believe an arson investigator or the fire department is absolutely going to go through the house. And one of the things the insurance company is going to look for is their goal in every insurance company that I've ever interacted with. When it comes to the claim side, their goal is to find ways not to pay stuff. And so if they're able to find things that are not UL listed and and it's not quite as simple as that, right? Because not only does it have to be there, it has to be not UL listed, and it has to be considered the source of the fire, the place where it started, or whatever. So you have to have a little bit more than just, it didn't have the sticker on it. But to your point, you're probably better off, and they're not that much money. So supporting them and buying the thing that is UL listed, I think is going to get you a better bang for your buck. Several packages in the Red Hat Cloud Services NPM scope were found to carry malicious payloads that fire a pre-installed hook on every NPM install. So, Steve, you took some time to do kind of a cursory overview to understand this better. What did you find?
So this was a supply chain attack, which is where they don't try and attack your individual computer. They're not attacking software in particular. They are trying to get malicious code into GitHub, or in this case, into the Node package management repository. So there were, I believe, about 96 malicious package versions that were found inside of the NPM repository. Now, important to know, it was discovered and locked down within a matter of hours. It wasn't even a full day that these things were out there. However, that doesn't mitigate the fact that if you had CI that happened to be pulling down the latest versions of packages, you were not exposed to it. Let me phrase that a different way. If your CI was running during that time and pulled updates, you probably were infected. And the severity of this is high enough that the advisory is assume you're infected and go change everything. Oof. So this one was kind of nasty. Essentially, what happened was there's some pre-hook files. So I guess my disclaimer here is I don't know anything about NPM and how the package management works and how that stuff happens. I'm a user of it in terms of like I can do npx install and that's about it. So all of this is I read and I am attempting to distill for the audience. But essentially, there's a file that gets read as a pre-hook file, and this is normally kilobytes in size. The attackers were able to inject 4.2 megs approximately into this file, and this gave it the ability to do all kinds of things. So it stole GitHub Action credentials. It did AWS, GCP, Azure, Kubernetes, HashiCorp Vault, NPM publishing tickets. So like if you have the ability to or are maintaining packages, it stole those. It stole CI and SSH keys, all kinds of stuff. And they did a bunch of stuff to stay under the radar. So they were able to munge logs so that they stayed hidden longer. They were able to exploit some mechanisms that I don't understand. So there's a two-factor mechanism when you are a developer. That's pretty standard. But apparently NPM has a feature called bypass_2FA, and it used this to defeat two-factor authentication for people that thought that they were secure. And so it was essentially going out, finding if it was a computer, like a desktop computer as opposed to a CI computer, it would then go and try and figure out, does this person have the rights to publish packages? And if it does, it would inject itself into those packages and then upload new versions of those packages into NPM so that it would kind of spread itself out. So it was kind of really nasty. The other thing that made it kind of difficult to clean up was just removing the package wasn't enough. It also looked for Claude Code, VS Code, and I think Codex. I'm not sure about that. That's the one from OpenAI. And all of these tools have the ability to run code on startup. And essentially, it injected itself into these settings or the code that runs at boot, and the computer would just stay infected because it's not where you were looking for it. So anytime that you opened your code editor, it would just reinfect the computer. So it got really nasty. And this is all what we think is happening because there was a bunch of care that was taken in order to obfuscate things. So for example, it went through, so the very first layer of defense that it had is it just used like a simple letter shifting cipher. So, you know, an A would become a B and a B would become a C or something like that. It had a specific one that's not really relevant other than the fact that it's just a first letter. It's a first layer of obfuscation. Then they did an AES 128 encryption on top of the code that was there. Then they also used a commercial code obfuscation tool so that even if you were able to get through all of that, the code would kind of look like gibberish or would be harder for you to reverse engineer. And finally, they ran this through a hashing such that they did it 200,000 times, as I understand it, which would basically make it impossible for the average person to be able to brute force their way through. So even if you decrypted it, it still had the hash on top of it. I'm not exactly sure whether it was encrypted and then letter cipher shifted and then hashed. Like, I don't know what order that happened in, but all those to combine to make it very difficult for them to crack this open. So the package existed approximately for about 4.5 hours from 10:54 a.m. in UTC to about 3:30 p.m. UTC on June 1st. So one of those things is if this sounds like something that might have been a problem for you, you've got NPM packages that you are pulling from. In this case, it happened to the Red Hat repository called Red Hat Cloud Services. If you're pulling from that, you probably want to go check to make sure that you're okay. Aside from that, there will link to some articles in the show notes. And this is just, again, my disclaimer. I read through it. This is what I gleaned from it. Hopefully it's relatively accurate.
Here's a question for you, Steve. Do you have any idea how something like this gets caught? Like, I mean, within a few hours, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that we don't know how long that it existed before it got published, right? So we know the time that the package got published. We don't know exactly. I'll phrase this differently. I am adopting the we as in the public, the Red Hat security. So this is not Red Hat internal information. I want to be clear about this. This has already been posted on the internet via various places. So I'm not disclosing anything secret to Red Hat. I also don't have any direct line to the Red Hat security people. So they're busy going through it, I'm sure. So I don't know how long this was latent inside of the Red Hat code before it got published, but what we know is it was published and accessible and being downloaded from those time periods.
Okay. So if you want more, like Steve said, this is public stuff, so it's available to you in the show notes via podcast.asknoahshow.com. There you'll find a link and a write-up to all of the applicable information. You can check it out, see if you're affected, and take appropriate action if needed. Mike McGrath. He is the Vice President of Core Platforms Engineering at Red Hat and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Hey guys, it's great to be here.
Thanks for making the time. So here's a question for you. What is the difference between RHEL AI and OpenShift AI?
I'd have to look at the price book, but probably a couple $1,000s a year, I would think. No, RHEL, we have an entire unit dedicated to AI offerings right now. And we talk about Red Hat AI as kind of an umbrella term. RHEL AI had been used previously to focus just on some of the underlying pinnings that would run then OpenShift AI, which is kind of like our ultimate sort of offering of what we've got. And OpenShift AI itself, just think of it as an AI-empowered OpenShift offering with some great features built into it, especially for AI workloads like VLM and the rest of that.
Back in 2023, we had you on. We talked about some of the source code changes. Mm-hmm. We have a few more years in hindsight. Can you tell me a little bit about looking back? Again, understanding hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think we got really right? What are some of the things that you think maybe there was an opportunity to improve or wish the community had understood differently at the time?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I look at when I look at the entire community ecosystem right now is there's this natural tension that exists between sort of the corporate and volunteer worlds, and it's always kind of a messy business. And certainly for the last several years, I found myself in the middle of that Venn diagram. And I think one of the biggest concerns that I've got is when I look back in time over the last 5, 10, and 15 years, there are far fewer purely open source companies out there. Now, companies like Red Hat exist with a business plan that funnels money back into open source developers that then work upstream. And so I fundamentally believe that an open source economy that doesn't do that, there's something wrong with it. And I think that's one of the big problems we have is there hasn't been another Red Hat that has popped up in another area. And I think, frankly, a lot of that's because people don't want to get rockied for lack of a better term. If you're developing some new open source tool and you've got to make a decision whether to go open source or not, the fact is the community itself has kind of normalized this thing where you can just, it was open source, therefore I'm just going to undercut this company that is paying open source developers. And because it's open source, yada, 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 I can get away with it. And there's a, and I'm not saying that, legally that there's a problem there. They're doing what they can do. Right. But I think that the normalization of that is going to lead to a really tough situation in the future where there are fewer and fewer open source companies, and you'll see more open core at best companies, and the rest will stay proprietary. And I think that's very unfortunate because that's not the world that I wanted to live in.
One of the things that I come across was there is a trend of code bases that started as open source, and they're turning to a closed code base, not because they don't value open source, but because with the advent of AI and the ability to crawl through and find vulnerabilities, there are companies out there that are just going, look, we just don't have we don't have the money to put the technical expertise to be able to audit this stuff properly. And so maybe it's just better if we put it behind a wall where you can't go bang at it. Do you think that's I guess I have two questions. One is, do you think that that's a threat to open source? And then second, is that really a valid threat, or has that been there all along, the ability to go knock on doors and see what breaks?
So I don't necessarily view it as a threat to open source, but I do view it as a large shift in the type of work that we're going to need to do over the next year or two. And I think all open source communities and even proprietary companies need to take a quick look at what their roadmap is and if they're going to be able to keep up with these sorts of vulnerabilities. And it's kind of a betting game. Is this a lot of extra work for 1 or 2 years? Or that, just these things that we've got to go find and then they're fixed, and maybe it'll, still be plenty of vulnerabilities out there, but it's this sort of large wave of vulnerabilities is solved? Or is this just what the new normal is going to be? Is the code that we're producing at this point sufficiently complicated enough that there are always going to be this huge amount of CVEs? I've got one of my Vert maintainers had a quote just in a status report that I had come up that really struck me. And he mentioned, if you take all of the AI slop out of the equation, all the stuff that is just garbage, and you look at just things that are valid CVEs, whether a human found them or whether an AI found them and they're valid, he's seen about 3 years worth of CVEs show up in the last month.
Wow.
And in RHEL, we're dealing with thousands of packages across the entire community ecosystem. And it is, at the moment, hitting communities disproportionately. Some of them are seeing a huge uptick in this. Some of them haven't seen any uptick at all. And it's, kind of a question of, some of those may just be very mature. They haven't changed much, and we've found most of what's there. And the other one is just that researchers and people that are running these models just haven't turned their eye to those communities yet. But I do think it's coming, and this has been a big shift in just in terms of the calories we're spending. We're spending way more time on fixing CVEs. It's without security fixes, nobody's going to use RHEL, and so it's a thing that we have to do. And we're also contending with a whole lot of new players in the space, and customers' demands are changing, and we're making sure that we're changing right with them.
So I want to come back to. I want to put a more fine point on the question that was just asked, and think more about when we're talking about that open source. The fundamental argument that is being made is that if the code is open source, people are going to find bugs. And what we were trying to frame unproductively was things like Metasploit has been a thing, even regardless of whether the source code is closed or open. And so the question is more around the idea of is it almost is it a fallacy, or in your opinion, do you think it's a little bit fallacious for people to close the source down, believing that that's actually going to stop the AI from banging on it and finding problems with their product?
Yeah, I do think it is perhaps a bit short-sighted to think that anybody can hide from AI in one way or another. I've heard even with Mythos that came out. I have not used Mythos, so I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, but I've heard that it has the ability with other tools to basically scan binaries. You don't need the source code at all for that. And I also happen to think that AI and open source are a very good pairing. I actually talked about this in my Community Day keynote on day one this week. The fact is, AI is certainly always going to know more about an open system, whatever that may be. But that also comes with many, many benefits in terms of troubleshooting, rapid adoption, rapid fixing, things like that. that those proprietary systems won't have. And so, especially if you started open and then went to proprietary, like you've given enough of a heads up to the bot, to the AI that it knows where to poke. But even in a purely proprietary model, I think that I don't think it is going to be a successful route that security through obscurity, even with these highly automated tools, is somehow going to work out for you. I just don't think that's going to happen.
You've described RHEL Engineering as a very open team that wants users to find things that are wrong and report them. What are some of the actual mechanisms for a community user that's, to be clear, different from like a paying customer to meaningfully influence RHEL's direction on to file bugs and have those bugs taken very seriously and reviewed?
Yeah, and are we talking about bugs or CVEs?
Let's go
Or
with
both.
Isn't a CVE a bug?
They are, but I would put them in. I would say a CVE is a bug with a time on it. It's got a timer built into it.
Let's back up.
Yeah.
Talk to me about a bug in the software in a piece of code that does something unintended, and talk to me about how that becomes a CVE and why there's a time constraint on a CVE.
Yeah, and so the thing about CVEs, especially today. Anytime we assess a CV, it gets this sort of rating: low, moderate, important, critical, and things like that. And it turns out a low CV might be something that you can just ignore, or even if you're not familiar with this, sometimes there are CVEs that require root access to be able to exploit. And so you might think, well, that's not that important. Maybe somebody found a bug, whatever. And one thing that we found is, again, to go back to AI, AI turns out to be really good at stringing several of these lows together to produce a moderate or critical. This is not something that this is something that has surprised me, at least, at how good it can be at doing that. And so if you're in the community and you want to influence this in some way, there's a lot of ways you can do it. One of them is to just work directly with the upstreams where we are. That's where, there is no, we follow the rules of the upstream, so there's not like some red hat process you've got to go through to work with us on the kernel or something else. And we even have upstream projects that do this in Fedora or CentOS Stream. And so you're welcome to go at any of those places that you want to go. If you want to work with us specifically in RHEL, this is where we make our money. We have the developer account, but there's not really a way to, it's a free account that you can use for a certain number of RHEL instances. But there's not really a way to get support for that. And so, for us, if you are a customer reaching out to us directly, obviously that's where we're going to prioritize of any kind of bug. And we'll work with you. And if you've got logs and the rest of us, that's where we will always go the extra mile to make sure that things are working and are performant as you want. But if you're just in the community and you want to work with us, or if you're using one of our many, many downstream rebuilds or an upstream build of some kind, upstream or at least further upstream, possibly in the Fedora space, is probably the best place to go. And you can work with our engineers there.
One of the things that I personally have enjoyed is watching the transition from RHEL. So like my first certification was on RHEL 5. I worked with RHEL 4, and back in the day, I actually found Ubuntu easier to use as a home user. And for me, and we've kind of documented this on the show, it started to change around RHEL 8. And I have a sizable, Noah calls it a data center.
It is, in his basement.
In my basement. And I flipped almost everything to RHEL now that used to be Ubuntu, with the exception of a couple of my storage things, because they're just a giant pain to deal with storage. But the point of all that back is that I've watched a progression of really exciting things in RHEL. And so RHEL 10 has been a thing I haven't tipped my toe into, because I did, and then I had to roll back my RHEL 9 virtual host because of all of the changes that happened between 9 and 10. But those are kind of, they tend to be security hardening, and there were some things that were really split out, like libvirt got split out into a bunch of different things. So all of that to say is, when you're trying to use your home lab to follow best practices or equivalents without causing yourself too much pain, what do you think are 2 or 3 of the security specific things to RHEL 10 that everyone should be thinking about adopting?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say is keep in mind, especially in a home lab, if you're doing similar stuff at work or you're just learning, a home lab with RHEL is a really great way to try to do the things that very highly regulated environments have. So if you can try to replicate what the banks are doing or elsewhere. Like, we provide the same tools in developer as we do in regular RHEL. And so don't limit yourself just because it's at home. Like, definitely go check it out and see what it can do. On the RHEL 10 specific stuff, obviously front and center for us right now is post-quantum cryptography. And for a lot of people that are using different encryption algorithms, they may have had some issues upgrading from 9 to 10 because we specifically have disabled some crypto libraries in 9 that we no longer consider safe. And we talked a little bit about this at last year's summit, but our understanding and the world's understanding continues to evolve. And for those that aren't aware, to very drastically oversimplify it, all encryption today is based off of just some math that can be done between two computers. And any computer on the planet today could decrypt any standard algorithm that exists, but it might take millions of years for it to do so. Using that same technology to decrypt on a quantum computer can take seconds or minutes. And even though the quantum computers of today can't do that, we're still shipping our encrypted network traffic, the humans, all over the internet where it could be intercepted. And while that's not useful to anybody today, at some point in time, the same thing that they're downloading today could be useful. And if you think about what your data looked like, say, 10 years ago, like some of that stuff is still valuable. Your bank accounts are probably similar. For me, my social security number is the same. My date of birth is all the same. My name, usernames. I probably have some passwords that are still the same as they were 10 years ago because I had no reason to change them. And I think that's one thing that we're worried about right now, even though these quantum computers don't exist at that level. And so we're helping all of our customers with education to help them understand why this is important. And as always with RHEL, we will adopt a security forward position. And that's why, that was one big change that we saw in RHEL 10. I'd also say, you mentioned, we've broken packages out and things. One of the other, a lot of our customers are asking for this, and it makes sense. But one of the best ways to keep your system secure is to install as little as possible on them. And obviously, we have relatively fewer packages that do more things. Oftentimes, you'll install a package, and there will be a vulnerable part of it that you aren't even using. And that's something that we've, as our customers have gotten more sophisticated in their abilities and needs, we're following suit by breaking out some of those packages, because a vulnerable package that is not installed on your system is one that you don't have to worry about. And so, we appreciate that in some cases, some of these decisions might complicate an environment a little bit, something to get used to as you move from 8 to 9 to 10, something like that. But we also think that from a security point of view, that probably is the best path to go, just so that customers can really just install the things that they strictly need.
So for those people that tend to be they jump a distribution. So what I mean by that is they're on 8, they're not going to go to 9, they'll go to 10 in terms of their life cycle. When you're thinking about those people, which there are many of those, myself included, what would you say, like if there was a feature or something about RHEL 10 that you really liked outside of the quantum computing, what would you direct people to, like, hey, you should probably go, like, check that out. This is kind of like a headline feature.
Yeah, for RHEL 10 was something that we've been looking at deployment options quite a bit, and even a lot of the announcements that we're making this week are kind of next generation technologies from the things that we added to RHEL. So image mode is a really great example for us. Being able to take and deploy RHEL instances with image mode using your existing container build pipelines and things is actually very interesting. And that is a paradigm shift from the way we used to do things, but it's not so different from imaging that, conceptually, if you're trying to architect your systems, it's not so different from building system images. This is especially true, maybe not in a home environment, but when you've got thousands or tens of thousands of systems, drift can be a real problem. And I think image mode is a killer feature for those that want it. As we move forward in time, sure, we launched with some features, but we continue to add to it. I would say outside of the RHEL 10 view of things, take a look at Hummingbird. That was something we announced today. I've got the T-shirt on today. I know folks at home can't see it. It's a great T-shirt, I promise. Hummingbird is another deployment option for us that is not like Fedora, and it's not like RHEL today. It's a new setup. We're trying to get 0 CVEs, which, as you can imagine, is a very difficult process to do. And for us, that CV remediation, back to security again, huge problem to solve, and one that we're taking very seriously. And I think for those that haven't looked at it, just do a search for Project Hummingbird. You can go see these images right now. They move at a speed that is faster than where you're used to in RHEL, but also if you're big on security scanners and very small footprints for just installing what you need, this may be something that you didn't even know that you wanted. And so I definitely encourage people to go look at it.
What can you tell us about RHEL Forever and this idea that you could get support for up to 30 years?
Yeah, a couple years ago, we started working on a project called Red Hat In-Vehicle Operating System. And it was the first time we really started to look at doing something different than RHEL. And one of the first things that came up was they wanted much longer life cycles because cars last a lot longer than RHEL does. And so, for me, that was, I really started thinking about it around that time frame. And in our business units and other parts of the company, these are the kind of things that we have always been asked for. And I think we kind of got to this critical tipping point where we realized that there was both enough demand to do it, and I think our tooling has gotten sophisticated enough that we've got a way forward here. And the basics are this. When we release a new version of RHEL, there's a class of customers that are excited, they're ready to go, they've been tracking it on CentOS Stream, and the day that we release it, they're ready to move to it because they want support and it's going to be a critical part of their environment. That's great. There's another group of people who have some old system running. They want it to keep running, whatever it is. And now their hardware is end of life and they need to go get new hardware. And so now that means they've got to upgrade to the latest version of RHEL and all the rest of it. And it turns out they're not excited about that. They love the value of RHEL, but that's created work for them that they would otherwise have preferred not to do. And I think this RHEL Forever concept that we've kind of been working internally with, and we're announcing it this week, which is great, gives customers a way to pay for additional support as we move forward in time. It tends to get more expensive the longer you go, but for customers that need that, it is worth it to them because this allows them to not get surprised by an end of life. Or in some cases, we don't hide when our end of lives are. But sometimes just because of the timing or other things going on, it can be very inconvenient, beyond inconvenient, to have to move off depending on what's going on at your company at that time. And so this gives them an option to stay on RHEL for a very long time. I don't know that we've actually haven't looked at the official marketing. I don't know how long this could go, but if somebody would like RHEL out there for 40 or 50 years, at least come talk with us. I'd love to hear what that's about. To see what the use case is. But yeah, our intention is to be able to support RHEL for a very long time, much longer than they're used to today.
So if you could pull back the covers a little bit, I'd be interested to know, so RHEL has both been famous and infamous for the long life cycle. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of distributions look at that and say, that's bonkers, right? And then you have other competitors that have just started to extend past that 10-year point, obviously meaning there's a market demand for that.
Yeah.
But that comes with a big burden of support in terms of being able to hold that up. Mm-hmm. So the question is, has the tooling improved such that, so RHEL has been a 10-year plus distribution for a decade or more at this point. So has the tooling evolved to the point where that support burden has lessened, or is just the demand high enough that coupled with the expertise that you have, you feel like you can continue to support that?
Yeah, I think I don't want to underestimate the expertise that we've been building inside of our engineering team, because I do think that's a critical part of it. It's not just the tooling. And I think the important thing to remember here is, let's just say we've got a RHEL release that is on its 10th year this year. We've announced an extended life for another 3 years, whatever it's going to be. And we've got a customer looking at the kernel today, and it's that kernel in that older release, let's say it's a RHEL 7 or RHEL 8, does not look anything like any other kernel on the planet. The upstream kernel is something that we, at that point, if we're at a 10-year mark, we would have forked probably 11 and a half to 12 years ago. And the upstream kernel, bless them, they didn't stop. They didn't wait. They're not waiting for us. They're charging forward. And so now we've got this sort of, we've got this kernel that we have a large engineering team maintaining, and we're constantly updating. Oftentimes it will look more like a modern kernel, even with its old version. But because of our experiences in doing this for decades now and keeping these long lives available, I think we've, knock on wood, I think we've seen just about it all. And so because of that, we've got experience to pull from when we see that there's a bug that we need to fix, but happens to require a newer memory management system that we weren't expecting at the time that we forked the kernel. And these are the kind of things that I think are making this possible. But then there's also the other side of that coin, which is customer demand is very high right now. I think our customers are in an environment that are getting more and more complicated. And oftentimes when they have the option to not change something, I think a lot of them will take that option when they, until they're ready to do something. And just because we happen to end of life something doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready. And therefore, RHEL Forever is born.
CentOS Stream is now the upstream from RHEL rather than a downstream. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going in terms of, is the community now shaping the future of RHEL?
Yeah, CentOS Stream in that community, it's different than the Fedora community. I think a lot of us have some ideas of what community means. And in the CentOS space, this is a place where our engineers are hanging out. And we've got some special interest groups that have a bit more autonomy. But because CentOS Stream is the literal upstream of RHEL, that is where we're developing RHEL. We used to do it in private. You wouldn't be able to see it. Mm-hmm. Now it's public there for everybody to see. It's very tightly coupled. Things only go into CentOS Stream when we think that they're ready for RHEL. And so, we do get some pull requests and things that come in. We get a lot of feedback. We've had some luck with what I would say more partners as well. We've done some experiments there for speed testing, new instruction sets and things. We see a lot of that. And we do have plenty of people that are still using this as a way to track what is coming for RHEL. And so, it's I think for me, I come from a Fedora background. I was a Fedora community volunteer well before I started working at Red Hat. I think it is a very different kind of community, but it's one I think is working very well for us. And because we've got several options, if somebody wants to be able to influence the future of RHEL in a way that, as a non-customer, if they're finding trouble doing that in a SIG or, a CentOS SIG or in the CentOS mainline, we've always got Fedora. And so, I think for us, we've got a couple of options for people.
So let's end on a high note. What I'm curious about is we're 3-4 years into the change with Stream. What has been an unexpected upside of this change? Like, you can only forecast so much. What were you really happy with about how this change turned out?
I think two things, and I think happy might be a strong word, but I do think it was a big shock to the system that somehow Red Hat no longer endorses downstream rebuilds. I think that was painful, but I think it was good for us to make that statement and for everybody to understand that we actually, as a business, these types of downstream rebuilds are actively harmful at this point. And I think that caused a lot of people to evaluate their use of CentOS at the time, and many moved to other distributions. Some moved to Fedora or Debian or elsewhere. I think that creates a much healthier ecosystem than the one that we had. And so I think that was good. I also think that being able to do this RHEL development out in the public space has been just fantastic for us because, at any point in time, we've got almost a dozen different versions of RHEL out there. And it can be difficult for our engineers to remember, well, what did I do where, what's available now or not? What do I have to keep NDA when I'm talking to customers versus not? And at this point, unless we're talking about an embargoed CVE, for the most part, they can go talk about what they're doing because they can go show it off in CentOS. It's just such a more natural way to do development, especially at an open source company. And because of that, we've had a lot of really great successes with some of our partner engineering teams. Most recently, we've been working with NVIDIA. It's been great to, and anybody can come and watch that work happen in the public eye, and they can contribute and test and do whatever they want. And I think that really is a much more natural fit for a platform company like Red Hat.
Mike McGrath, he is the Vice President, Core Platforms Engineering at Red Hat, a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Mike, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us. We'll get you back in the program soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We're back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com.